All right, so this is a chart basically that's in that first section of notes that I'm going to say is kind of your introductory science, characteristics of life, and then some information that we will literally use all year long and pull back to in different ways. It just kind of depends on what we're doing. So just real quickly, this is an overview of the 6 kingdoms. Historically, we had 5 kingdoms where the 2 bacterial kingdoms were lumped together. And then we had the other eukaryotic kingdoms. So just real quickly, notice here we've got the word Monera and these 2 kingdoms. That was once one kingdom with all bacteria. So now what we have is a 6 kingdom classification with archaebacteria, eubacteria, protista, fungi. You hear both plantae and animalia. Okay. Notice along the top, the very top row is the domain, and we're going to talk about what that means. You've only got 3 domains, archaea, bacteria, the second column, and then the rest of the groups of organisms are in domain eukarya, right? In the characteristics of life notes, we talked about, or I lectured on the fact that cells can be either prokaryotic cells or eukaryotic cells. So there's your cell type row, okay? Notice only bacteria are prokaryotic, everything else is eukaryotic. Then we get to cellular organization. Organisms can be either unicellular or multicellular as an individual organism, but within these groups, notice that you've got bacteria that are only unicellular, you've got protists, some of which are unicellular, some are multicellular, and some are colonial. Protists, that's a kingdom you're probably not super familiar with. Things like an amoeba, for example, that's a protist. Algae, like seaweed that washes up on the beach, that's a protist. That is not a plant. Okay, so that's one that might be a little bit elusive to you right now. Fungus, kingdom fungi, some of those are unicellular, most of them are multicellular. The only unicellular fungus is yeast. Okay. And then when we get to plants and animals, they're all multicellular. So you can kind of go across each row and notice essentially some just similarities and differences between kingdoms this way. Then mode of nutrition, the bacterial groups, some members are heterotrophic, some are autotrophic in both of those kingdoms. Protists are the same way. Some protists are heterotrophic, some protists are autotrophic. Fungus and animals, okay, these are the 2 that a lot of times people try to use the words you see in parentheses interchangeably with heterotroph, and they are not, okay? So heterotrophs can be either decomposers, right, or they can be consumers. If they are external heterotrophs, they are decomposers, meaning that they break down their food source, whatever they are going to decompose, essentially. They're going to break that down externally and then absorb nutrients into their bodies. Okay? Internal heterotrophs or consumers, they are going to take in food into a hole or an orifice in the body, like your mouth, for example, and then digest that food internally. Okay? So heterotroph is a category above decomposer and consumer. Okay? You can't use this word interchangeably with heterotroph, nor can you use this word. Okay? So there's 2 types of heterotrophs, and I'm harping on this because somebody's going to be confused, okay? And somebody's going to say, well, isn't a decomposer the same thing as a heterotroph? No, it's one type of heterotroph. Now, autotroph and producer, those are interchangeable, right? So plants, for example, are going to make their own food using sunlight, okay, through the process of photosynthesis. So are some members of these groups. Okay, reproduction. Remember we said that gametes either are egg or sperm, if we're talking about sexual reproduction. So all bacteria, since they're single-celled, they can only reproduce asexually. Okay, in these 2 kingdoms, if the organism is multicellular, then it's going to reproduce sexually. If it's unicellular, it's going to reproduce asexually. But fungus are weird, okay? They've got all kinds of crazy things going on with their reproductive cycles that we don't get super involved with, but just know that they're kind of a weird group, okay? And that all of them can actually reproduce both sexually and asexually. Plants and animals reproduce sexually. They both make gametes, eggs and sperm, okay? Plant sperm, for example, when it's pollen season and there's yellow pine pollen everywhere, that's plant sperm, okay? Cell wall. So the cell wall that surrounds the cell membrane on some cells and is a true outer barrier. It's present in both bacterial groups. It's made of sugars called polysaccharides here. Just it's real general here. This is a specific polysaccharide called peptidoglycan. We aren't going to get into that too much, okay? And protists, if they are if the protist is plant-like, then it's going to have a cell wall made of cellulose just like plants, okay? If the protist is animal-like, okay, or fungus-like, then it's going to lack a cell wall, just like an animal. And then notice fungus, they have a cell wall. It's made of a substance called chitin, okay? C-H-I-T-I-N is pronounced chitin, okay? Like you go fly a kite, but put an N on it. Habitat, this is just real general, that basically your archaebacterial group, these are your extremophiles. They love extreme environments, places where maybe there's no oxygen, a hot spring, okay, like Yellowstone, for example. Okay, the guys are at Yellowstone. Sewage treatment plants, high concentrations of salt, like the Great Salt Lake and the Dead Sea, things like that, okay, high acidity. This group of bacteria, this is the bacteria that can live anywhere. These are the bacteria that you'd be more familiar with, okay, that are all over our bodies, inside of our bodies. They're basically everywhere we are all day long. There's more bacterial cells in and on your body than make up you as a human, okay, than there are human cells. Protists, they live in aquatic or aqueous or watery, wet, however you want to say that, environments. Some can be fresh, or they are freshwater or saltwater. There are some parasitic protists as well, okay? So we'll get to that eventually too. Fungus, they live in moist or damp terrestrial environments. And terrestrial, that word means on land. Okay, so I would make sure that if you haven't already started to write down that like terrestrial means on land, and some of the things that I said through here, that you maybe make some extra notes. Plants are mostly terrestrial, okay? The ones that are aquatic, like if you think of like a mangrove tree, you know what duckweed is, a lily pad, things like that. Those are the ones that are aquatic, but they're mostly terrestrial. Animals can live in pretty much any type of environment. So this is, again, we're kind of talking about the whole group. And then these are some specific examples, okay? The only thing that I'll draw your attention to down here is that the suffix phile, P-H-I-L-E, that we see here, okay, that means to like or to love, just so you know what that word even means. So like a thermoacidophile likes a hot, acidic environment, okay, or needs the hot, acidic environment in which to survive. So these are some specific genus names of bacteria and protists that are the ones that are in italics. Okay, so Clostridium, Staphylococcus, and Streptococcus, specific genus names of bacteria. And then all of these are specific genus names of protists. And we're going to talk about what a genus is. And then just some common names here. Okay, so we're going to use this chart all year long. Let me know if you have any questions.